Having made its mark as one of the best sci-fi fantasy comic series in recent times, Judge Dredd takes its readers on a journey to Mega City 1, a post-nuclear megapolis situated in the eastern United States. While Mega City 1 can be considered a standard city-state, the rules and regulations of this megapolis are far from ordinary. The city functions under the watchful eyes of the judges, who undergo rigorous training and devote their entire existence to the city. They act as enforcers of the law and often dole out harsh punishments for even the smallest of crimes. While these judges protected the civilians, life in Mega City 1 was no walk in the park. And today, we shall explore every single aspect of Judge Dredd's Mega City 1. Before we go into our explanation, we have a very small request. If you like our content, please support us by subscribing to our channel. This is a small click for you, but for us, it means a lot. Thank you. Let's begin. How did the idea of Mega City 1 come to the creators? When artist Carlos Ezquerra, editor Pat Mills, and other creators brainstormed the idea of the Judge Dredd series, they intended for it to take place in the future in New York. As Carlos Ezquerra got to work, he sketched a skyscraper in the background of one of the comic panels, and Pat Mills was fascinated by this futuristic structure. He asked Carlos to design a poster for the city with tall buildings, endless roads, and a futuristic city design that had them rethinking their entire concept. While they started at a different point, they unanimously agreed that they must explore the idea of this new city. Art director Doug Church proposed that they extend this city across the eastern seaboard and pitched the name Mega City 1. The collective efforts of the creative team breathed life into the idea of this futuristic city, where the judges were initially a part of the police force. They were admired by civilians and were not expected to work round the clock, but by Prog 118. These judges were depicted as authoritative law enforcers who had turned Mega City 1 into a feared police state. While the first outline was set in New York, Prog 3 retconned and stated that New York was one tiny part of Mega City 1, and Prog 42 finally established that Mega City 1 was an independent state free from any United States or Canadian origins. A brief history of the city. When the United States faced a huge crisis due to skyrocketing crime rates, the government desperately tried to get things under control until a few street gangs raided the White House. At this point, Eustace Fargo proposed the concept of judges who could work with the police force to target criminals and restore peace. In 2031, Fargo's plan was finally executed after he gained the support of President Gurney, as well as the common public. Judges soon started working alongside the local governments, and the governor of New York even attempted to oppose their formation. As crime rates worsened, these judges were at a loss, and the American government finally created a few megacities. They proposed the Boston, New York, Philadelphia Autonomous Metropolitan District as one of the few first megacities, which eventually led to the establishment of Mega City 1. At this point, there was one judge for every 5 police officers, and the judges were still struggling to establish their position within law enforcement. Finally, the judges declared a 2-week-long lockdown in New York to drive an anti-judicial terrorist group out, and their success in this mission helped them gain power and establish their position. As Mega City 1's population kept increasing, it was suggested that these megacities could be split into smaller cities under the Autonomy Act. While constructing these cities, a corporation demolished a low-income neighborhood with the promise of building a much better space, only to betray them in the end. This situation led to several riots, and the judges resorted to brutality to bring the situation under control. The Special Judicial Squad had to intervene to restore peace, and the Justice Department was later split into 3 autonomous branches under the new act. One branch took care of the crime rate in Mega City 1, while the other branches, including Foreign Affairs and the military, operated from outside the city. They ended up enforcing harsh immigration laws for citizens who wished to move to the city, while the citizens living in the city also realized that things were not getting better for them anytime soon. As the corporations continued to build more blocks, the city became congested and crowded, and the crime scene was worse than ever. While the population starved and suffered from petty crimes, the city saw great technological advancement and sent an astronaut outside the solar system. They soon started colonizing alien planets and developing AI-powered robots. and Mega City 1's Justice Department also thrived during this time. They created a Council of Five that would hold the Chief Judge accountable for his actions, and also established a Psi division in 2057. They developed a cloning technology to create new judges around 2064 and took absolute control over the city. They had gotten rid of President Robert L. Booth, and Chief Judge Fargo implemented several harsh and restrictive laws to run the place cost-effectively. Mega City 1 became a breeding ground for just about everyone, and mutants, the Space Corps, and robots soon became a part of the city's population. Around 2079, a new generation of judges, including Joseph and Rico Dredd, completed their training at the Academy of Law. In 2018, Mega City 1 attempted to steal Texas City's resources, leading to a war that finally ended in 2086. At this point, the city-state decided to install a friendly judge regime in Britsit and Bruja, and they soon successfully dominated the rest of the European Union. Chief Judge Clarence Goodman established a special judicial squad to eliminate the corruption within the force, and he later announced a mass interstellar colonization policy that compelled alien worlds to share their resources with Mega City 1. This decision was the root cause of several conflicts with alien empires in the future, and the Space Corps often had to intervene. In 2019, the Justice Department installed the Statue of Judgment, and in the same year, Judge Dredd, as well as the entire force, faced several troubles due to the Robot Wars, the Apocalypse War, and a bizarre instance where a mutant monkey possessed Chief Judge Goodman. In the following period, Mega City 1 faced several troubles due to scarcity of resources, the spread of diseases, and homelessness issues, and Hilda Margaret Magruder played an instrumental role in restoring the city. Around the mid-2100s, the city witnessed a short-lived democracy revival movement after the martyrdom of an activist named Hester Hyman. While her death fueled several protests against the judicial dictatorship, the Democrats did not have enough public support, and Judge Dredd proposed a referendum to overthrow the current leadership. As he predicted, the public was not interested enough to come out and vote, and it was decided that Mega City 1 would continue to remain under the judge's control. Over the next few years, the Justice Department faced a new threat in the form of a zombie apocalypse of Judgment Day, and they also had some internal struggles after Chief Judge Hilda started suffering from dementia. Eventually, the senior judges voted for a new leader, and Chief Judge Hadrian Volt replaced Hilda. The city thrived under Volt's rule until he committed suicide, and Barbara Hershey was appointed the next chief judge. In the next few years, several judges tried their hand at maintaining law and order within Mega City 1 until the events of Chaos Day finally caused the city to collapse. Chaos Day was a Sov revenge plot that included a combination of plague, terrorism, and uprisings that would cause the economy to collapse and drive Mega City 1's administration into the ground. The city took forever to recover from Chaos Day, but the city's population had slowly but surely seen an increase due to improved immigration laws, as well as the collective decision of several civilians to return to Mega City 1. As Judge Smiley's Black Ops division was exposed, he was punished for his crimes, including his role in the Apocalypse War. After Smiley was executed, Judge Logan stepped up as chief judge in 2144, and he made some administrative changes, such as appointing Mechanismo Harvey to his council. The civilians were enraged over this decision, and the older Council of Five went as far as to attempt a coup on him. Logan continued to take tough calls regarding the city's construction and administration, and Mega City 1 was hit by a disastrous storm that did a lot of damage to the economy. After doing his best to secure emergency funds, Logan was desperate to improve Mega City 1's technology, and he resorted to illegal means that got him as well as Mega City 1 in trouble, and they had to face sanctions as well as potential suspension from the Conference of 10. What does Mega City 1 look like, and how is life in Mega City 1? Created on the land that was once known as the Boston to Washington, D.C. stretch of the United States, Mega City 1 was a way to deal with violent crime rates and the ongoing population crisis within the country. This city-state was one of the few areas that survived the nuclear war of 2070, while the rest of the United States had turned into a barren land known as Cursed Earth. Over time, the area within Mega City 1 stretched to Miami, Florida, Ohio, and and West Virginia, and a futuristic city was developed on top of the polluted, half-destroyed civilizations that soon became known as the Undercity. While these lost cities turned into lawless lands, a few buildings such as the Statue of Liberty and the Empire State Building were transported to Megacity 1. Initial maps for this city-state suggest that it stretched all the way from southern Maine through Florida before finally ending in the Quebec City-Windsor corridor stretch in Canada. At this point, 800 million civilians inhabited Megacity 1, but the population nearly halved after the nuclear attack of 2104. The nuclear attack once again changed Megacity 1's geography, and the city-state now stretched from New Hampshire to North Carolina. One tiny region in the northwest survived the attack, and this northwest hab zone was connected with the rest of the city by a bridge. It is said that this fictional city's population density is higher than any city in the modern world, and most of the civilians lived in apartment blocks that housed 50,000 citizens at once, or preferred to live in vehicular mopeds that could easily be transported. For administrative purposes, Megacity 1 was divided into 305 sectors that could be divided into central, north, south, east, and west zones. The first 300 sectors were the main city, while sectors 301 to 305 consisted of the northwest hab zone. This zone witnessed an uncontrollable increase in crime rates until the appointment of Chief Judge Volt, who went to great lengths to clear the place. Every sector had their own dialect and accent, but they all mainly spoke a local bastardization of the English language known as Meg-speak. After the unfortunate events during the Days of Chaos storyline, Megacity 1's population was almost entirely destroyed in 2134. Barely 10% of the population survived, and the city's administration went into steep decline and declared bankruptcy. After the next few years, Megacity 1 did manage to grow again and started accepting immigrants and refugees until their population soared and reached 100 million in the year 2139. While the population was thriving, the Academy of Law was destroyed, and only a few surviving judges had to bear the responsibility of managing an ever-expanding population. A recent story arc set in 2141 revealed that the population is about 130 million, as many civilians have been returning to Megacity 1 after fleeing during the Chaos Plague. This was hopeful news for the city's future, as Chief Judge Hershey hoped that the high number of fertile populations might help repopulate the city and bring it back to its glory days. Typically, the civilians in Megacity 1 were largely unemployed and known for relying on robots or artificial intelligence to get things done. These civilians ranged from lazy, jobless individuals to rebellious criminals who robbed and murdered each other despite being aware of the consequences they would have to face. The judges lacked empathy towards civilians and viewed them as ungrateful beings, and Chief Judge Francisco once even asked them to commit suicide to decrease the population and balance the budget. These civilians turned to strange hobbies such as sky surfing, peeping, or bat gliding, and judges sometimes imposed heavy taxes on these hobbies to bring the citizens under control. Most of these citizens were also illiterate, which made it easier for the judges to control them or influence their ideals. Literate citizens were no better, and a huge chunk of the population attempted suicide only because they read a newly released book on how to end their lives. At this point, the judges had to intervene and put sedatives into the air systems to bring the population under control. A few citizens exhibited extraordinary intelligence and worked towards developing new military technology and medicines, or constructing fancy buildings such as the Hall of Justice. Since most of the citizens were unemployed, they got bored easily, and the judges had to invent leisure activities or tourist attractions such as the Agro Dome and the Alien Zoo to keep the population engaged. The Agro Dome was a space for frustrated citizens to clear their minds by ranting to robots, while the Alien Zoo was filled with strange species from across the Milky Way galaxy. Other leisure activities included the Central Megacity Library, the Megacity Museum, and the Dream Palace, among other things. There were illegal drugs such as Stookie that originated from an alien species' glands and helped civilians stop aging. Sometimes citizens engaged in hobbies such as sky surfing, where they used surfboards to move speedily, or bat gliding, where they wore bat suits with attached wings that helped them fly on the thermals above Megacity 1. How is Megacity 1 governed? In 2070, the democratic government of America was abolished, and Megacity 1 had transformed into a dictatorship ruled by the Justice Department. In 2052, this city-state was granted autonomy by the Union, and the chief judge at the time, Judge Logan, assumed authority of Megacity 1. He set up a council of 5 senior judges, and the civilians were allowed to elect city councils and mayors to delude them into thinking they were staying true to democracy, while the common people elected these lower-level officers. The judges had supreme authority over all the functions of Megacity 1. A few years later, in 2133, a referendum was held where the civilians were given the right to choose whether they wished to restore their democratic government. However, the mere idea of democracy had been diminished to such a great extent by this point that the civilians did not bother to fight for this right and remained under the judges' rules. In a couple of story arcs in 1978 and 1979, the mayors appointed by the civilians were seen giving orders to the judges, but these arcs were soon discarded as the judges were promoted to a higher level. What role do the judges play in maintaining law and order in the city? Judges Fargo, Solomon, and Goodman are a few famous judges in the history of Megacity 1, but this entire justice system was founded by Eustace Fargo when he first worked as a special government prosecutor for street crime. At the time, the violent rise in crime demanded swift action, and Eustace Fargo's proposition was greeted with a lot of controversy in the government. However, the electorate was in favor of this idea, and judges were introduced as a part of the police force. These judges initially wore suits similar to police officer uniforms, and over time, they seized complete power over Megacity 1 after the Third World War of 2070. They were trained in the Academy of Law for an average period of 15 years, and they typically enrolled at the age of 5. They were asked to grow their clones and were encouraged to recruit promising children. They were also expected to refrain from sexual relations and remain celibate, as any personal attachments might make them vulnerable or create biases. Judges who graduated from this academy were given a lawgiver handgun with a handprint sensor that activated the gun only in the hands of its rightful owner. If someone tried to misuse the gun or steal it, it would immediately self-destruct or destroy the unauthorized user. Judges also rode Lawmaster bikes, carried several heavy weapons, and seemed to be guided by artificial intelligence. The Justice Department included a domestic intelligence division as well as specialized medical facilities that ranged from a tech division that included forensic scientists to the Psi division that included psychic judges. To keep an eye on the judges, the system included a special judicial squad that monitored the judges. Judges were sometimes assigned to a specific city block, and these judges had the authority to pass judgment on civil cases. At the end of their service, street judges typically chose to take the long walk and live in exile after having served Megacity 1 their entire lives. They would either venture into the radioactive desert called the Cursed Earth outside the city's limits, or travel to the Undercity, which consisted of the remnants of New York City. After choosing the long walk, a ceremony was arranged for the retiring judges where they walked through an honor guard of judges who fired their weapons as a sign of respect. Another judge bid him farewell forever, and the retiring judge was then expected to leave and never return. If a judge did not wish to take the long walk, he had the choice of taking up an administrative or teaching job within the system. Exploring the harsh and ruthless laws of Megacity 1. Megacity 1 had harsh laws that prohibited citizens from engaging in several harmless activities and enforced cruel punishments for such negligent crimes. For instance, it was illegal to store sugar or consume coffee as it was categorized as an illegal stimulant. The judges were quite stern while enforcing these laws, as they hoped to bring the soaring crime rate under control. Typically, civilians were sent to tiny isolated cells known as ISO cubes to punish them for everyday crimes such as littering or jaywalking. The judges were known for doling out punishments for extended periods, and sometimes they imposed the death penalty in extreme cases. Death penalties were mainly reserved for cases where the city was threatened, but in some cases, civilians were given a death sentence to intimidate other criminals. If a civilian resisted their arrest, judges had the right to shoot them on sight or even sentence them to the ISO cube for the rest of their lives. The judges were also held to the same standards as civilians and were expected to strictly stick to the law. Their punishments were stricter than those of regular citizens, and they were banished to decade-long sentences on Saturn's moon, Titan, after surgically modifying their bodies so that they could survive in space without a spacesuit. They were also expected to pay a compensation fee to innocent civilians if they falsely accused or punished them without evidence. However, judges typically find it a minor crime or misdemeanor to charge such innocent civilians to get away without paying any compensation fee. Judges were also obligated to obtain a firearm firearms permit to possess any firearms, and this permit was very difficult to obtain. Besides the judges, the city deaf units were given the freedom to use heavy weapons during wartime. In regular times, the distribution of firearms was closely monitored, but a few of these weapons still made their way back to the black markets. Some civilians also inherited firearms from their ancestors, but possessing them was considered illegal and came with a huge penalty. While punishing criminals, it was illegal to resort to torture, but chief judges sometimes allowed the authorities to use physical and psychological torture. This was typically done in cases where someone threatened the city or the Justice Department, and many total war cell leaders were tortured to death in this manner. However, the judges did not disclose the true cause of death and wrote off their deaths as heart attacks or strokes. They sometimes targeted leading Democrats before any Democratic marches to tire them out and ensure they were too drained to do anything drastic. Does Megacity 1 have a military force? After the United States Armed Forces were abolished, Chief Judge Goodman helped the judges in their attempt to overthrow President Booth during the Atomic Wars. After the downfall of their president, the rest of the U.S. Army was soon destroyed in the 2071 Battle of Armageddon, and the judges started killing or arresting any remaining soldiers. At this point, judges became a crucial component of City 1's military forces, but there have been several inconsistencies across the franchise. For the most part, the military forces restricted themselves to conflicts in outer space, and it was said that no one besides the judges or city deaf was authorized to punish the civilian population. These military forces were known as the Space Corps, and they included Marines and fleets that protected Megacity 1 from alien threats. While the Space Corps refrained from targeting civilians, the city deaf and the judges were authorized to do so. The city deaf, also known as the Citizen Defense, was a reserve force made up of civilians employed during periods of crisis. After the Cursed Earth story arc, the city's military forces primarily consisted of the judges, while stories penned by Gordon Rennie included an additional defense div. The 1990 spin-off story Maelstrom introduced the concept of star judges, that is, strategic target attack retaliation judges, to keep a closer eye on uprisings or rebellions. Stories written by John Wagner took an entirely different approach, wherein the military was a separate unit that looked down upon judges for being too lenient with the civilians. The Warzone storyline introduces to us the Genetic Infantry Forces, which consisted of genetically engineered soldiers built in a lab. Besides all these forces, Megacity 1 had a network of spies as well as a Black Ops division of judges that helped them maintain smooth functioning within the city-state. Marvelous verdict. To sum it up, the creators of Judge Dredd comic series have successfully created a fascinating city-state that enforces strict laws and instills fear in the hearts of civilians. Megacity 1 is one of the best fictional city-states in pop culture, and the mere idea of living in such a place under the sharp eyes of judges is enough to send a shiver down our spine. And if you liked our content, don't forget to leave a like and subscribe to us if you haven't already. Have a good one, and be safe. Thanks, everyone!